Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
And we want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another. And Damien is up this week.
Yes, sir.
What do you bring to the table today?
So I have brought a piece from Inquest to the table for us to talk about today. That piece is called The Algorithmic School-to-Prison Pipeline. It was written by Nicholas E. Stewart and published back in April. A little bit about Nicholas. He is an author, researcher, and also serves as the executive director of the Justice Education Project. And as I mentioned last week, this piece is a part of Inquest's greater Carceral AI series that we've been reading this year. And so I'm excited for us to continue to learn from it here today. This piece is all about how technology is being used all around the country to identify and flag students and children as risks to public safety, and the impact of these carceral and surveillance efforts and technologies on our children and on our overall society, really. Yep. So Nicholas actually opens the piece with a case study of how the Pasco County Sheriff's Office down in Florida, did you know about this?
Only when we read the last article and it briefly mentioned it.
Okay, yeah. So that sheriff's office has been keeping a list of quote unquote at-risk children for years, and how they were doing it without the knowledge or consent of the children or their parents, which is horrible in and of itself. But then when you factor in the fact that they have accumulated somewhere between 10 and 17,000 students on this list over the years, is really infuriating. So Nicholas offers some really great analysis about this, which I thought would help us kick off our conversation today. Yep. So he says, quote, "The Pasco County Sheriff's Program lays bare the current state of the algorithmic school-to-prison pipeline, interconnected systems in which surveillance infrastructure concentrated in Black and brown communities marks young people as threats and feed them into the criminal legal system. The pipeline doesn't begin with an arrest or even an offense. It can begin with a grade, a counselor's note, a zip code." And so what's fascinating to me is that, this system, it's a system that targets these students often for no reason at all, or just because they're from a marginalized community, or because of individual or an institutionalized racism. The list is actually so long of reasons of why this is happening and how this is happening. But it's having a tremendously negative impact on our children before they've even had the chance to become who they are and who they will become young in their lives. So, there's a lot for us to talk about here. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think about this as the sort of modernization of the school-to-prison pipeline, the digitization of it.
Yes.
And I remember a few of these things being mentioned in the last article we read, like I said, about pre-crime, but seeing the details of it here really illustrated how dystopian all of this is. Yeah. And one of the things I want to point out from that quote you just shared is that this stuff just reinforces that study from a few years ago that pointed out that the biggest predictor of life outcomes for people is the zip code that they're born in.
Yeah.
And this is just doubling down on that fact in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out that the Pasco County Sheriff's Office described the factors that would lead to them putting a child on this list, who, by the way, are as young as 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
So Nicholas says, quote, "The factors that listed included low intelligence, coming from broken homes, being socioeconomically deprived, maintaining a poor school record. Children who had never committed an offense could still be flagged. Their traumas filed away not as harms done to them, but as statistical predictors of what they might do next. Simply growing up in the wrong neighborhood, the wrong family, or the wrong circumstances was in and of itself damning." And I want to focus on the factors here.
Okay.
Those are things that are derided as excuses when we talk about how systemically we're failing children.
Yeah.
But when it's convenient to add a kid to a list and make sure they get surveilled to prove that they're innately somehow delinquent, then it's okay to acknowledge that these are factors that put them at risk of something. And it's only in this carceral framework that we're allowed to acknowledge these things.
Yes.
If we want to do something about these factors that actually address them and help to prevent whatever might happen
Right.
to these kids, we're in the wrong somehow, or we're bleeding hearts or whatever. And it just points out the double standard of, well, when we need to surveil kids, we know that these are the problems. But when we want to address the problems, well, no, you're wrong, and that these kids are just innately bad. And it's just very frustrating to see it used in exactly the way that cops have always used this kind of information against people.
Yeah, you said it so beautifully there. Like, it's this carceral mentality, this carceral framework, as opposed to anything remotely related to this idea of helping folks and working to address the social issues or the situations and try to help better people's lives. It's, oh no, they're just bad, as you said. Right?
Yeah.
5 and 6 years old. 5 and 6.
Yeah, that's kindergarten and first grade.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about here, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you talking about those factors. One of the other fascinating pieces about this article and piece was Nicholas uses this case study that's basically from our own backyard as an example of how this carceral AI technology is being used in just terrifying and dangerous ways. He offers 2 case studies from right here in Maryland, one from Montgomery County and the other from Baltimore County. And so he shares this, quote, in early March, Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland began piloting AI-powered weapons detection across 3 high schools, fitting existing security cameras with software from a company called Volt AI that claims to identify weapons, fights, and medical emergencies in real time. Volt AI's CEO has said the system doesn't use facial recognition, doesn't make decisions autonomously, and cannot identify race or gender. But such assurances will not be able to prevent real-world harms. A few months ago, an AI-driven security system outside Kenwood High School in Baltimore County misidentified a crumpled Doritos bag as a firearm. After a miscommunication with the school, the alert was forwarded to law enforcement, and numerous police cars responded to the scene. Officers ordered 16-year-old black teenager Taki Allen to the ground at gunpoint, searching and cuffing him before realizing that he was unarmed. The technology itself didn't act alone, but the incident shows how even safeguards can fail in practice. How Montgomery County's pilot will unfold and what consequences it may bring remains to be seen. And, you know, for me, these examples are particularly wild to me because right now currently work with a lot of students, college students who went through the Montgomery County public school system. And I myself am a product of the Baltimore County public school systems. Kenwood was actually down the street from my high school. And so for me, all of this kind of just hit close to home. But really what's more important than me is, you know, how these examples just highlight the fact that this technology is not perfect or in any way reliable or accurate.
Yeah.
And then you put it in the hands of law enforcement and it just becomes dangerous.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to a point, I don't remember if it was in the last one we talked about in this series or maybe the one before that.
Yeah.
It was like the point isn't to make these better either, and that's not the point that you're making either.
Right.
But just to point out that making these things quote unquote better or more accurate just will lead to more incidents like this same thing happening because it will, as you say, justify biases of law enforcement officers who are inexplicably in our schools. And so, I think about Montgomery County you and that being right around the corner from us, literally, and then Baltimore County, you being a product of that. Pasco is the county just north of where I graduated from high school. So there's a lot of ways that all this is hitting close to home in ways I didn't expect when I opened up the article.
Absolutely.
I remember the Pasco thing being mentioned in the last article we read, but just all of these examples being so close to personal experiences.
It's wild. It's wild.
Have had is wild. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is how this carceral AI stuff specifically with the school-to-prison pipeline is tied into eugenics. Nicholas says, quote, what unites these algorithmic interventions is a logic popularized by 19th century criminologist Cesar Lombroso. The belief that criminality can be predicted from characteristics rather than actions. While Lombroso used skull measurements and facial features, at some point he cited the projection of the lower face and jaws found in Negroes. Today's system uses grades, neighborhoods, and even abuse histories. This is digital Lombrosianism, and its purest expression is perhaps the Pasco Manual, which listed the circumstances of a child's life as potential evidence of their future crimes.
Good connection there.
Yeah, and that stuff from Lombroso is directly out of eugenics playbook. It's
Yes.
labeling superficial human differences as indicators of criminality to support the notion that means that those characteristics make those people less than human,
Yes.
or are people who should be removed from the gene pool. And this kind of thinking led to forced sterilization programs and genocidal thinking both here in the US and across the world, notably in Germany, with the elimination of Jewish people, people with disabilities, queer people, and other so-called undesirables.
Yes.
And all of that was pseudo-scientific race nonsense, a lot of which was cooked up right here in the US.
Yes.
And this is just an extension of that with an algorithm layered on top of it. I feel like I've said this almost exact same thing before, but continuing it here in the modern era with digital tools, this is just despicable. And
Yeah.
it's going back to that same kind of eugenics thinking.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Nicholas's analysis here and this connection to eugenics. And it's all just racism. It's blatant racism. And to me, it also connects to, you talk about, it's the characteristics of folks. It's the digital version of this eugenics. It's also just exposing the disposability of folks, right?
Yeah.
And how that is also at play here, which to me is just, as you say, despicable in so many ways. One of the other things I appreciated in this piece, there's a lot obviously, was Nicholas's work to highlight some of the incredible organizing that young people have been doing to push back against this. Like, this piece is focused on young people in schools, so it was great to have that connection and to learn more about what young people are doing to push back against this. And so Nicholas shares, quote, "In 2020, 15-year-old Sneha Revenar campaigned against California's Proposition 25, which would have replaced cash bail with an algorithmic risk assessment system. Her youth-led coalition helped defeat the measure by a 13-point margin, despite the political establishment's support, one of the rare instances of voters rejecting a tech-driven reform outright. Soon after, she founded Encode Justice, a national youth organization advocating for the regulation of artificial intelligence. The organization, which has over 1,000 members and a partnership with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, spans 40 states and 30 countries. In 2019, high school students in New York City organized against a $30 million school surveillance initiative under the slogan, "Counselors, Not Cameras." Brilliant. 2 years later, in 2021, youth organizers in Massachusetts partnered with Encode Justice and the state's ACLU for a statewide week of action, demanding a ban on facial recognition in schools. In 2024, student-led coalitions, including Encode Justice, delivered over 12,000 petition signatures to the U.S. Department of Education, again pressing for the same ban. Meanwhile, in Chicago, youth and community organizers were part of a broader push that helped build pressure to end the city's ShotSpotter program. All of that's incredible. And we talked a little bit about that ShotSpotter program before, but all of this action, all of these victories are important. I love that Counselors, Not Cameras tag name. I mean, that's a brilliant name. But, so it was just really awesome to learn about this activism, this organizing that young people are doing because they know that they're directly impacted by it. And they're like, absolutely not. And what's really powerful to me, and Nicholas speaks to this, is the impact that young people can have in helping to shift the narrative, to shift the focus, and to shift the direction of where we're going. It really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think that the students are naming how they're being impacted, and that the power in that itself is great.
Yes.
And the other thing we're seeing is a push across the country, both in schools but also in workplaces, for generative AI and large language models as tools.
Yes.
And I've heard people say that they're encouraged to run everything that they write through these models so that they are training them. And that's a whole other conversation.
Bonkers, but let's continue.
And Nicholas makes some important points on this front. Quote, "As school districts race to adopt AI literacy standards and hand students access to generative tools, many of the roughly 32,000 youth locked up in carceral facilities across the country often can't get internet access at all. Meanwhile, AI is actively deciding the futures of these same youth, who stays confined, what interventions they receive, and how closely they are monitored, often with almost no transparency or input from those affected. The same society that wants to teach kids to use ChatGPT is using algorithms to decide whether they get to come home."
Wow.
I think this is all connected to a lot of things, but anti-intellectualism is what comes to mind. And it's purposeful. I think these tech CEOs and the Trump regime and more people, the billionaire class, want us to be compliant little consumers who listen to what our chatbots tell us and spend money on new stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so the push to use these bots and the decision to allow AI to make these decisions are both tied to a desire to have us stop thinking and accept the so-called decisions of computers and allow us to think that some people are disposable or innately dangerous or what have you, to go back to the Lombroso kind of eugenics of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's also fascinating to me is, to your point about, it's like the shiny new thing. Like they want us to just consume the shiny new thing and use it and look at all that it can do for us. But as you say, it also is deciding who is disposable and not, and working in conjunction with law enforcement to lock students up. And you talk about the young people who are in prison and don't have access to the internet. It's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe instead of this and us consuming the shiny new thing, why don't we do this?
Or people
It's
even
crazy.
asking it basic questions about factual things, and which drives me nuts because it's just making up things that you want to hear.
Yep.
It's responding to questions in the ways that it thinks you want to hear
Right.
the answer to that question. And so there's going to be a lot of confirmation bias in how it responds to you, and it also will make up references.
Yes.
And so it looks legit, and then you try to go look up the reference that it's citing.
Doesn't exist.
And it's not real.
Yep.
And we're supposed to believe that this is like telling us factual information, but that's also not how these models work.
No.
They really just put words together in a way that sounds like what other humans have written as responses to similar questions.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of intellectualism to it all. And ultimately the point of these models, or the foundational thinking of these models, is whatever the tech company thinks.
Yeah.
So it's also, we're supposed to accept that some people are disposable, and fundamentally we're supposed to accept the answers of this thing, right? And those, I think, for me, are tied into the same kind of compliance that they're looking for from all of us.
Absolutely. None of it is good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're already starting to have this conversation. So let's talk about application. How does this piece and our conversation about it apply to our everyday lives and work? I wanted to share how Nicholas closes this piece because I think it highlights how this carceral AI technology has evolved and extended the reach of the criminal punishment system, which we've been talking about. But he also shifts a little bit to talk about what it's going to take to fight against it. So he closes the piece with this, quote, "The modern school-to-prison pipeline starts with school data feeding into sheriff's lists, moves through risk prediction scores that can land youth in juvenile detention, and extends to surveillance that shapes how young people experience their neighborhoods. But it isn't inevitable. It has been interrupted before by young people who understood what they were up against, understanding it, naming it, tracing it, refusing it. That's where the work begins." I just loved that ending. I appreciate his work there to name how, a byproduct of this carceral AI technology is the impact on young people and children as young as 5, as you said, the impact that these children are experiencing in their neighborhoods, the idea of how this technology is shaping their lives. That to me is so wild. But it's that end point there too about the hope and how young organizers are the key to what's possible that I want to hold on to.
Yeah, I think that's important to hold on to.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that fundamentally.
Yeah.
My application comes from my last point I was making about how we're being pushed to trust computer algorithms more and more.
Yeah.
Nicholas says, quote, "Teaching kids to use AI is one thing. Teaching them how AI is used against them is something else entirely. An AI literacy that teaches students how to use generative tools fosters job skills. A political education that teaches them how these tools are used against them fosters survival skills. These are not the same thing. And we've been funding the first while ignoring the second almost entirely." And this point is very important, I think.
Yes.
AI literacy is being pushed everywhere. And I hate it because it's so limited. It doesn't include anything like what's in this article.
Yes.
It doesn't include the ecological impacts of these companies. It doesn't include the ethical just shadiness of all of their decisions on how they trained it, on what data they've stolen to train it. It's just about how to use these chatbots to get the best response out of them.
Yes.
And you even see that when people are roasting flyers, AI flyers online.
Yes.
And the AI defenders jump in and they say that we need to learn how to engineer prompts better. Prompt engineering.
Right.
Which is just a weird dystopian bootlicking position to have.
Yes.
I need to talk to my computer better so it works better. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
and it's
wild.
not like when Siri came out, when was that, 15, 16, 18 years ago, however long.
Yeah.
And it was, you have to learn how to, like, what are the commands? This is
fundamentally
something
different.
very
Yes.
different. And it's just so very frustrating. And I think my application is that the political education around AI, we've got to catch up.
Yes.
And be able to communicate and help people see the ways that this stuff is being used against them.
Absolutely.
As Nicholas said earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
that I quoted.
Thinking about it in a more broader sense and targeted sense, because I think people are coming around to the ecological impact and the environmental impact of it, and a lot of the organizing around that. And even in our backyard here in Prince George's County, it's been beautiful to see. And there's so much more that needs to happen. Very good application there. All right, let's talk about homework. What do we want to do to continue our learning and unlearning work once we leave this here table? I think we've got to continue reading this series. It's been so illuminating. There have been so many incredible, you did a great job with this today, connections between the pieces. And I feel like we've been having some great conversations from it. So I want us to keep reading this. We've now read 3 pieces so far, and it looks like there are 4 more articles in this series. So shout out to Inquest. Thank you for putting this out there. We're going to continue reading this one.
Yeah,
What do you think?
absolutely. Let's keep learning from this series because there's always something new to
Yes.
learn from how awful all of this is, beyond just my general haterness, my status as a AI hater. Seeing how it's applied to carceral logic, I think, is just dumbfounding.
Yes.
Like, it's so hard to fathom how it's all fitting together, and reading this helps illustrate all of that. So that's my homework too.
I love it. Very good. All right. Well, that's our conversation about this great piece in Inquest. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. Aaron, my friend, you're up next time. What are you bringing to the table in our next episode?
I am bringing a resource from Interrupting Criminalization called Don't Be a Propagandist, Trans Criminalization Edition.
Nice.
So it was written by Ariel Rebecca of Trans and Caffeinated Communications, Lewis Raven Wallace, and Andrea Ritchie of Interrupting Criminalization. And here's a bit of the description from Interrupting Criminalization's website. Quote, "The criminalization of trans people is not a new phenomenon, but indisputably anti-trans ideology has escalated over the past decade in the U.S. and internationally, driven by authoritarianism and the Christian right. These attacks share a clear through line. They deploy criminalization, whether through criminal punishment, denial of basic necessities such as healthcare, and detention, expulsion, or exclusion from public life, to disenfranchise entire groups of people."
Wow.
And so this is a toolkit written for journalists in particular to challenge the ways that journalism approaches and listens to law enforcement and people in authority in that kind of framework. But I think there'll be a lot that we can take away just as people.
Yeah.
In lessons of seeing where this pops up, especially with this anti-trans lens, which continues to expand around the world. So I'm looking forward to digging into that next week right here.
Absolutely. Me too. Their resources are always so great, Interrupting Criminalization. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this one next time. All right. With that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what we want you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next week.